Um, okay.
How much do you know about Islam? First of all,
Sorry, I don't think there's any sound.
No, there is sound, don't worry.
Oh, okay.
how much do you know about Islam? First of all, Islam is a religion, like Christianity or Judaism. A person who practices the Islamic faith is a Muslim. Muslims refer to God as Allah and base their faith on the teachings of its holy book, the Quran. They believe God created two types of guidance for humanity: internal guidance in the form of intellect, and external guidance from prophets, the most notable being the Prophet Muhammad. Like other religions, there are denominations of Islam. Most familiar are Sunni and Shiite, and the way Muslims practice Islam can vary. Not all Muslims practice Sharia law, for example. Muslims pray 5 times a day, either at home or at a mosque, a practice called Salat, to help focus their minds. And they recite those prayers in the Arabic language. Some Muslim women choose to wear a traditional headscarf called hijab. Others choose to wear a burqa to cover the whole body. The holiest time for Muslims is the month of Ramadan, where fasting from sunup to sundown allows them to renew their focus on life and on God. Like many religions, Islam and its practices are deep and complex. With 1.6 billion believers worldwide, Islam continues to be the fastest growing religion in the world.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Before we start, we would like to welcome President of ABIM, Encik Faisal, Secretary Encik Fazril Saleh, to this wonderful event that we are organizing together. Before we move on to our speaker for today, I will just introduce what is GBSM and what is this project all about. First things first, GBSM is a youth organization that represents the Sikh community and is a Badan Gabungan of Majlis Belia Malaysia. As we started, we realized that we want to promote unity, and because ABIM is doing so much good work on the Bangsa Malaysia project, we decided to partner with ABIM and come up with this series of unity webinars where we speak about different faiths in Malaysia. And the first series of our webinar, we go to the majority religion in Malaysia, which is Islam. And who better to talk to us about Islam than our brothers from ABIM? Yeah, with that, I'll pass on the time to Encik Faisal, who will be speaking a mix of English and Malay. And he will go on for about 15-20 minutes. And if you have any questions, hit us up on the chat box or even comment on Facebook, and we'll take your comments and we'll pass it to Mr. Faisal or Fazril to answer your questions. Yeah, Faisal. Muted.
Alright. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good evening, Mr. Gurpreet Singh, all my fellow friends, esteemed friends, Gerakan Belia Islam Malaysia. Thanks for having me and ABIM to take part in this very important program, Cawan Separuh Penuh. For me, it resembles the spirit of sharing lah. For me, yeah. Prophet Muhammad SAW used to say, "Food for one person is enough for two." Yeah. So, of course lah, like a glass of minuman, it is enough to have 2 person to share in one. So that means Cawan Separuh Penuh lah. So that resembles the spirit of sharing, I suppose. But not for the coffee lah. If I want to take latte, of course, I myself have to finish it rather than sharing with others. Well, okay. We will be having a discussion or dialogue on Islam, or the main topic or theme for tonight is exploring Islam from a Malaysian perspective, where I have a few slides that we'll be sharing, and perhaps we will be having more discussion on the topic. Because the different perspective on Islam in the eyes of Malay communities, especially in Malaysia or Malay Archipelago or Nusantara or Southeast Asian Muslim. Of course, there are differences in the sense of history, in the sense of perhaps ideology, and also in the sense of interaction between the communities itself. Okay, okay, let me put this. Okay. Okay, just 3 points or 3 main characters that I will highlight. First, the history of Islam in the Malay Archipelago, and then the history result in the characters of the Malay Muslim as cosmopolitan, which I will describe further. Meaning to say, the cosmopolitan concept encapsulates the features of openness, universality, openness, and democratic society within the Malay Muslim character, and also about the society empowerment or societal empowerment, the progressive of the society in the eyes of the Malay and in the eyes of the Islam in Southeast Asia. Alright, first we go to the history of Islam in Malay Archipelago, and I think all of us have known it was written by many scholars, even Orientalists, by either from the West or from the East, in many languages about the history of Islam in Malay Archipelago, and we have known better, even in our textbook, history textbook, Islam came to Malay Archipelago without compulsion and bloodshed. And why? Since Malacca itself was known as a maritime international trade center, and it then became a multicultural and multi-religious center as well, where all religions and nations congregated in Malacca, and it was the beginning of Malacca's exposure to Islam. So the traders from Yemen, there are many views. Some see it from Yemen, some see it Muslims from China, some see it Muslims from India. But after all, we can conclude that the exposure of Islam to Malacca derived from the traders, international traders, either from India or from Arab countries or even from China. So it was the beginning of Malacca's exposure to Islam. So having this interaction and the interaction between international traders, especially Islam, and also non-Muslim in Malacca. So gradually, we learn something new about new religion, about Islam, and later on, at the end of the day, Malacca itself became Muslim, and also all the Malay Archipelago, including Java and so on, became Muslim. And it is worth to note that also, apart from the role played by the international traders, it was also the role played by the local preachers, where we can see there are many kind of uniqueness in terms of preaching, dakwah, or giving exposure about Islam in Malay Archipelago, where for example in Javanese, not only Javanese, but even in Kelantan, even in Peninsular Malaysia, we were proud with this kind of cultural activities like wayang kulit. So this kind of wayang kulit also was partly became one of the ways, or as a means to preach or to give something exposure about Islam. So this kind of the uniqueness of how Islam being portrayed, how Islam being exposed to the community of the Malay those times. And of course, this is contrary to the issue of like what I said just now, the compulsion. There were no compulsions and bloodsheds on to receive or to accept Islam in Malay Archipelago. And with this kind of after the coming of Islam, I would like to quote the book by Said Najib Al-Atas as well, where it was said that the arrival of Islam in the Malay Peninsula and surrounding regions has changed the image of a nation that was once characterized as pragmatic and utilitarian, meaning to say experimenting with different faiths based on practicality and benefits towards establishing an identity as a religious and cultural nation. Just a few notes that I want to share. Even the history of Malay in pre-Islamic period, we can see they were in a segregation period where mainly divided between the elites and also the public large, because perhaps as what was said by Sanaji as well, those times when we use Sanskrit, for example, or when there are certain rulers or raja embracing religion before Islam, they were the system like caste system, for example. So the public, the majority of the Malay, the marhain, the people from the ground, they didn't feel that kind of religion really embedded in their heart because of that thing that I shared just now, like the caste system. It always benefit the raja, benefit the elite rules. But Islam came. Islam gives some sort of empowerment to the public large, to the people on the ground, and uplift their moral, and then they become the new kind of nation, and we can see through the civilization like Malacca and so on. Okay, this is very important. It is also quoted by, even it was quoted by Anwar Ibrahim in his book The Asian Renaissance. How the peaceful and gradual Islamization in Malaysia, as I said, without bloodshed, without resentment, molded the Southeast Asian Muslim community side into one which is cosmopolitan, open-minded, tolerant, and amenable to cultural diversity. And of course, the outlook is also fashioned by the strong presence of people of other faiths who reciprocate the Muslim tolerance. So it is something has to do with the peaceful coexistence. So when we talk about the peaceful coexistence between Islam and non-Muslim in Malaysia, it is not new. We have been in this kind of concept of peaceful coexistence, the tolerance, acceptance, and so on, since those times during Malacca Sultanate. And in fact, as I said, since Islam came to Malaysia, came to Malay Archipelago without bloodshed, so there were no reason for us as a Muslim, as a Malay Muslim, to bear any malice towards non-Muslim. We didn't have any reason to hold grudge towards other faiths, other beliefs in this region, because we embrace Islam without force. There is no war. There were no wars to spread Islam in this region. So, as I said, there were no reasons at all for us to hold any grudge or to bear malice towards other religions. So we can live peacefully with the tolerance concept, or the peaceful coexistence between Muslim and non-Muslim, even during those times. But of course, in fact, for us, even for me, it was the colonialism that sparked the religious hatred when Portuguese came, and it was tragic war between the foreigners, the Portuguese, when they came, and of course, it was the first time to have the biggest bloodshed in this archipelago. Okay, so all in all, when we talk about the history, so that's why I said just now, it is very important to understand the history. So when we talk about the history of Islam in Malay Archipelago, especially in Malaysia, which I said just now, encapsulates the features of openness. So we can see the Malay itself, we have this kind of the character of cosmopolitan. In our Muktamar, our annual general meeting, we have delivered our presidential address in two languages, in Bahasa Melayu, or English we call cosmopolitan Islam and the forging of bangsa Malaysia. We try to connect the character of cosmopolitan Muslim in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, and how it benefits in forging the bangsa Malaysia. So when we talk about cosmopolitan, it encapsulates the features of emollient. Relatively, we are emollient. We don't want to have any fight. We want to find a solution. If there is a religious tensions between community, we tend to find amicable solution to find solution. That's why I myself, I have, characterized even the Malay as emollient. We are moderate and we have our own, like the so-called delicate touch. And quoting from Demokrasi Kita, Muhammad Hatta, he was the Deputy President of Indonesia. He tried to analyze the character of Malay Muslim as democratic society, because where in his book Demokrasi Kita, he tried to emphasize the fact, even in village, in kampung, when we try to find decision, for example, we tend to have consensus, everything in consensus. We emphasize more consultative manners. So meaning to say we are democratic enough. There is no one-man show, even though we have ketua kampung, the village, the head of the village. But at the end of the day, in kampung, when we try to have certain agenda or certain important program with the community, we are democratic enough to find solution or to find in terms of decision making process to have the consultative or muafakat. That's why we use the term of muafakat. Okay, with regards to the issue of empowering, yes, of course, Islam as a means to empower society. In relation to what was said just now, but the issue of muafakat, like I said, how to find amicable solution, how to drive a society forward. So actually, it is very important to note that, for example, when we talk about the pillars of Islam, it has something to do with the society. That's why we Malay Muslim, we are really community-based society. Okay, for example, when we talk about the profession of Shahadah, okay, that's one thing. After we have this kind of the profession of faith or Shahadah, all the four types of pillars of Islam really have something to do with the society. First, the daily prayers. We are encouraged to have daily prayers, congregational prayers. We have Jumaat prayers. So it has something to do with the society. And also, of course, in the prayers, when we recite Doa, we recite by using the words we. For example, when we pray in our prayers, we use the term of we instead of I. So meaning to say it resembles the society itself, the community itself, the ummah, the community. Third, about this kind of zakat, of course, giving the alms, or give some donation to the communities who are in need. So it has something to do with the community as well. And fasting during Ramadan, of course, it is very important. Apart from to stretch some, to have some training on our iman, our faith. It is important. On the fasting, to always be reminded about the people who are living in a miserable manner. And also, the fifth one is the pilgrimage to Mecca, Hajj. Of course, it has something to do as well with the society, where during the Hajj, everybody are equal, regardless whether you are a king. You have to wear the same kind of even the so-called clothes. You are really equal, and it is important as well to note the letter written by Malcolm X, Malik Shahbaz. Malcolm X, he was in 1960s during I think all of you have known in America in 1960s there were the so-called right-wing populists as well, like in Trump, but I think worse than Trump lah, where that's why from the Islamic perspective we have Malcolm X, and then from the Christian they have like Martin Luther King Jr. to fight for the rights of the color, the people of the color, and Malcolm X, when after he embraced Islam, when he went to Mecca to have Hajj, he has written a letter to his friends in US. He told about how impressive he see the Muslim in Mecca. The white, the people of color, the black, they can share the plate, they eat together. It is we cannot find. From what he wrote, we cannot find this in America, in US, because US there are a lot of discrimination against the people of color from the white people. So this kind of the thing, I think a very important story written by Malik Shabazz or Malcolm X, his genuine experience when he went to Mecca for Hajj. Okay, and then when we talk about the society as well, we have hadith Prophet Muhammad SAW. He used to say that we as Muslim, we owe his obligations to another Muslim. So so Islam, we give emphasis on, for the Muslim to be part of the society. Okay, first, when we meet each other, Muslim and Muslim, it is obligation for us to say salam, to pray for him, peace, to say peace to him, assalamualaikum, like for example. And then secondly, when we got invitation, we must accept the invitation, unless, of course if there is certain unavoidable or like now we have COVID-19. Okay, that's exception lah. Okay, and then thirdly, when our friend need some advice from us, we must advise him sincerely. That's the obligation. And then when he or she sneezes and praises Allah, so we have to respond. For example, when one sneezes, they say Alhamdulillah. So we need to pray for him, Alhamdulillah, meaning to say Allah love you. We have to say that because it is part of the dua, and it is obligation for us to dua. To pray for our brothers. And then when he or she falls sick, we have to visit them. It is obligation to visit our friends, our brothers who are sick. And then when on his or her death, we have to join his or her funeral. So it is like a symbol where we can see Islam gives emphasis for the Muslim to be part of the society. We have to be part of the community. No man live in an island. So in Malay, we symbolize this kind of obligation with the gotong royong culture. And of course, now I do believe until now we have this kind of gotong royong. For example, when we got invitation, for example, to have like kenduri, it is not just, we as Malay, we come to makan-makan, but basically we will join the masak-masak first. We will try to set up everything for him. So that's the gotong royong, the spirit of gotong royong. It is not just, receive the invitation and then we makan and then we say goodbye. But we come earlier, even the day before, to help them to cook some food, for example, to set some, whatever that is needed by the tuan rumah lah. Okay, and then when we have our friend, even on his or her death, basically we will try to help them to set certain things that it is needed as well. So all in all, so we in the Malay community, we perceive Islam as something that really give emphasis or emphasize ourselves to be part of the community, to empower the community, and we come up with our own activities, like I said, gotong royong, to enhance further on this aspect to empower the society. And yeah, I think my last slide, we have this kind of campaign, Bangsa Malaysia and Bantu Membantu. So now with the COVID-19 pandemic issue, it is very important to help all Malaysians, regardless of color, races or religions, even non-citizens as well, the undocumented, the migrants or refugees, all of us need to be helped. And we try to have this kind of operasi turun lapangan with the hashtag of Bangsa Malaysia Bantu Membantu. Everyone can play a role to help those who are in need, regardless of, as I said, political ideologies, even religious belief, colors, and so on. Yeah, so that's all from me lah. I think I pass to Guprit. Thank you.
Okay, terima kasih Encik Faisal. Thank you so much. I think what we have learned here today is something that we have actually never learned in our textbook. Some of the things is very familiar to me about Malacca and how Islam came to the Malay archipelago. But I like the points that make Islam a very relatable religion, something that is very everybody can practice. It looks like it is a simple religion. You know, it's easy to follow. It's not very complex, and those are the things that it's very important that we know. You know, so that we can understand our brothers and our sisters that are in Malaysia. With that, we will take some questions. But before we start, I got a question for you, Faisal. So I was just going through Google, and I saw that Anwar Ibrahim's book was written in 1996, and from 1996 to now is many years. How do you think the situation has changed from the time of the time Anwar Ibrahim wrote that book about Islam in Malaysia and the moderateness of the Islam or the Muslims in Malaysia, and how is it today? Maybe you can give us a bit of insight.
Okay, so okay, in this book, Cosmopolitan Islam and the Forging of Bangsa Malaysia, actually we try to address this kind of identity politics issue. I think your questions more related to the issue of identity politics in Malaysia, and of course, when we talk about this kind of issue, Cosmopolitan Islam, okay, let me begin with the first concept. Of course, as I said, we are emollient, we are moderate, we have our own features like universal. We embrace the universal values. We really appreciate the interaction between all religious beliefs. That's why we have our own civilization, because civilization only can raise because of this kind of interaction. There is no one civilization in the world that raised because of one identity. Civilization must adapt with the cultural differences between other races. Even in fact, the book that I'm still reading, Peter Frankopan, where he said, like Persian Empire, when Persian Empire conquered certain states, they themselves have to adapt with the culture of that state in order to sustain, to remain in power in that state. Okay, but you know, the issue that we address even in the policy speech, first, the colonialism issue, where we quote the book of Syed Hussein Alatas. First, when the colonial, they themselves try to bring this kind of the myth of the lazy native, the native not only in Malaysia but also in Southeast Asia as a lazy. The pribumi lah, not only Malay but also all the natives in Southeast Asia as lazy. They are dependent. They cannot be independent, and this is really of course, a kind of insult, but more than that, it has something to do with the character of the Malay or the character of the native in Southeast Asia, too much dependent on the political elites. Meaning to say, everything that has something to do with the political elites, they tend to have the element of failing threat because of political dependency. And what the things make worse is that the myth of the lazy native was prolonged by political elite in Malaysia. Yeah, frankly to say, like even in UMNO, even in the presidential address, we quoted in a book by UMNO, Mental Revolution, where they said about Malay always need to be dependent, meaning to say, in order to hold power, forever. So they keep this kind of the myth to be prolonged, so that Malay always be dependent to this kind of political elites. So if you want to change the government, for example, this kind of elite politics, so they can easily spark the hatred among the Malay, so that, or they will say that, oh, Malay now is under threat. So Malay always can only be dependent to this kind of political elite. And that's why we try to challenge this tradition, challenge the myth as well, of course. And if we manage to challenge the myth by empowering the society, that's why in the slide, we have to bear in mind when we receive Islam, even it is kind of reminder to the Malay as well. When we receive Islam, it is kind of sort of empowerment. We have to empower ourselves, not become the community that too much dependent on the political elites, as what was before colonial. And of course, during the colonial, the spirit of cosmopolitan, the spirit of being independent were declining and become worse, more declining, because it was brought by political elites. So we have to challenge this, and we have to empower the community. That's why when we talk about Bangsa Malaysia, we want to do away from a political framework, because otherwise it won't work. So we try to establish this kind of concept of Bangsa Malaysia from the ground, from the people themselves, by empowering the people, especially from the Malay, from being too much dependent on this political elite. Because we are independent in nature. Everybody, every race, every religion can have their own civilization without depending on political power or the certain small elite group of people.
Okay, thank you. From what I hear is you are saying that the political elites have used this propaganda of lazy ethnic, I like this word, right? Lazy ethnic propaganda, and use it to stay in power. And Islam goes against that narrative to say that you should be empowered yourself. And you pointed out some very good examples. What we will do next is, thank you, Faisal, for answering my question. We'll go to some of the questions that have been posted either on the chat, or we have been getting some questions from our social media. If you can, Simran can share the screen, we can look at the questions that, Faisal, if you can stop sharing, then we can look at some of the questions.
Right. I will stop sharing.
Okay, so the first question we have here is, you spoke about Islam as a factor in uniting the Malay nation. Is this the reason why Islam in the region transcends ideology and instead is held as an identity? A lot of people don't look at Islam as only a religion, but they look at Islam also as an ideology, identity, and they see that this is who I am, from A to Z. Do you think that this is one of the reasons, because it is so dominant in our country? Do you think that becomes like an identity, not just a religion?
Yeah, actually, Islam, apart from the identity, actually not only Islam but also other religion, because in Malaysia or in Southeast Asia or even in Asia, we are relatively religious in nature. we have our own religions. So when we look Islam or when we look religion, we try to reach Islam or Islam not only as religion but as a way of life first, and then as a way to find solution. And of course, when we talk about Islam, that's a very important point as well. When we talk about Islam, it is not just about religion restricted in the sphere of religion itself. Like secularism lah. Islam as something that constrained for the religious purposes, like rituals and so on. But for us, Islam is more than that, because we do believe that Islam interpretation of the religion in this kind of the modern state, like secular, constrained to the topic of worshipping in the mosque per se. But Islam is more than that. As I said, it transcends the ideology. And of course, that's why when we talk about socialism, for example, when we talk about laissez-faire, so many kind of scholars try to find the similarities or compatibility between Islam and that kind of ideologies. We have like the Syed Hussein Alatas, even Chokro Minoto. They wrote something with Islam and socialism. How Islam compatible with socialism? Because we do believe Islam as a solution. So that's why we look or we perceive Islam not within the sphere of religion itself. And when we talk about democracy, we try to find the compatibility between Islam and democracy. How? By empowering democracy, it has something to do with the empowering of Islam. It is not a threat. When we talk about democracy, it's not the threat to Islam, but it is part of the solution that Islam really wish for.
Okay, thank you, Faisal. So what you are saying is that Islam is just not in the mosque. It is just not secluded to one side of praying, but it also encapsulates almost the whole part of your whole life. And that is why identifying yourself as a Muslim, it encapsulates everything apart from just praying. You know, a lot of people may say religion is just belongs in the mosque, but what you are saying is Islam encapsulates all parts of your life, and even into political concepts. You are saying that those are the things that even you are saying scholars have argued that there are similarities between these political concepts and economical concepts that and it is there in Islam. Yeah, that's what you are saying. So I think that is a wonderful way of framing it, that the identity shouldn't just be confined to the mosque, or the religion just shouldn't be confined to the mosque, but it should be celebrated as part of your whole identity. Thank you, Faisal. We'll move on to the next question. Yeah, you spoke about the Malay Muslims. The Malay Muslim is emollient. So some people would say that Malay Muslims in Indonesia isn't as emollient as Malay Muslims in Malaysia. Why do you think so? Do you think there's a difference between in Indonesia's the way it is in Indonesia and the way it is in Malaysia?
Okay, actually, to answer this question, I think it depends on what lens that we are using. If we use the lens of politics, I think Indonesia is far better than us. Because, okay, for example, when we talk about the issue of the flawed democracy in Southeast Asia, Indonesia is something different with this kind of flawed democracy. Because after Soeharto, Indonesia, they are more liberal, and even until now, they are more democratic as compared to Malaysia. Even now we're having Myanmar and many issues about democracy in Southeast Asia. So if we look from the lens of political Islam, even politics itself, Indonesia more emollient. They tend to be more liberal. They tend to be more moderate in finding certain kind of solution. But if we look from the lens, from the lens of autonomy, for example, like in Malaysia, we have our own, we have certain kind of autonomy in terms of religious affairs. If I may say lah, Okay, like for example in Sabah and Sarawak, we try to give more leeway to the religious authority in Sabah and Sarawak to accommodate with the cultural differences in Sabah and Sarawak. So meaning to say we are more emulate in that way, in giving certain kind of leeway to the religious authority, to the maybe perhaps politician in dealing with the multiculturalism in certain state. But my overall my general overview, yeah, I think Indonesia perhaps more emollient and yeah, of course more liberal as compared to Malaysia. But they have their own way lah. Malaysia, we trying to have this kind of emollient nature, but in stages. And of course, sometimes we have to be careful. I mean, to accommodate with the cultural differences or religious differences in Malaysia or Indonesia.
Okay, so yeah, like there was the mayor of Jakarta was a Christian guy, right? Purnama. So that shows that they are a bit more open to this diversity, and I like your view where you cannot compare lah. Sometimes it's very very different, but certain things, if you wear a different lens, you will see it differently. Okay, before we move on to the next question, if anybody has any questions, please leave it on the chat box, or go to menti.com, and our code for the menti.com is 948-2146, 948-2146. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Faisal. We move on to the next question. Guys, the next question, what would it be? Okay, you expressed that Islam practice is based on the community. Would you say that this is a double-edged sword? Okay, so I'm not very sure about this question. What does it mean? But do you think you can dissect it? I'm not sure what it means.
Yeah, I myself not pretty sure what does it mean. I mean, but as I said, okay, in ABIM himself, we embrace the term of Khairul Ummah. Khairul Ummah means the best nation, or the best umat lah, the best nation. Where in the Quran, it was stated that Allah said to the Muslim, you are the best nation, but with certain prerequisite. Okay, if I may recite, kuntum khairu ummatin ukhrijat linnas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar. So when we talk about the community, the best nation, Allah asks us to be the best nation, and Allah said you are the best nation, provided you have to fulfill certain criteria. Forbidding what is forbidden, asking or promoting goods, and also about the faith. So we do believe that from this verse of Quran, Allah said to us that we are the best nation with the condition. It is a conditional text, and of course it is different with perhaps the understanding from the Jewish people, for example, because of course Quran, Islam, and Christianity and Judaism, we have something similarities in terms of faith. But when we talk about the best nation, for example, now we are talking about the issue of we should be the best. In Islam, when we talk about the best nation, it is something conditional. We have to be, bear in mind, it must be measured from merits. It is not just because of you are Muslim, you are the best. No. In Islam, you have certain conditions that you have to fulfill, or it has something to do with the merit. So if you want to become the best nation, the leading nation or whatsoever in Islam, it is conditional. It is not just like, since you are Islam, since you are Muslim, you are the best. No. So meaning to say, it has something to do with the empowering system as well. So in Islam, Islam encourages us to be the best. Islam doesn't say that you are the best by birth because you are Muslim. You have, as I said, you have to fulfill certain conditions, certain merits in order to become the best. So this is kind of the, I think, empowering system. We should empower ourselves in order to be the best. It is kind of motivational verse as well. But we have to fulfill certain condition. So, and Allah said about the nation, you are the best nation. Allah didn't say that you are the best individual, you are the best Muslim. No, you are the best nation. Meaning to say, you are representing the nation, you are representing the community, the ummah. So when you are saying that you are the best, it is not you as individual as the best nation. I mean, as the best Muslim, but you have to be the best within the sphere of the best nation itself. So it is about the community. Sorry if I fail to answer.
No, I think
manner lah.
that was good. The way you brought in the context of the community and how you are said we are supposed to strive to be the best nation. I think that's what we believe here in GBSM. Also, we cannot achieve it on our own. It has to come with unity. It has to come with working together. And I think days like today make me feel very happy that we get to learn so much and understand each other. Yeah. So thank you, Faisal. We move on to the next question. Yeah. Next one. Okay, this is maybe something that you may like. What are your thoughts on religious policing in Malaysia, like using religion as a part of politicking? Yeah.
Yeah. I try to be moderate enough lah to answer this question. For me, there are pros and cons in terms of religious policy in Malaysia. And of course, if you talk about okay, I go to the cons first lah. Yeah, the setback of religious policing, we are refrained with one interpretation of religion per se. In other words, if you want to practice religion, we have to practice just within the sphere or within one interpretation or ideologies of Islam as understood by certain elites or certain group of people who are leading this country. So that's the con. But we can see the pros as well. The pros of the religious policy, at least to deter the ideology of extremism, for example. So in order to deter or to tackle or to counter the ideologies of terrorism, for example, the extremist community from foreign countries, for example. So it is very important to have this kind of religious policing. You have to have certain institution to ensure that there is no extremism or extreme interpretation of Islam to be taught in the mosque or in the schools and so on. So yeah, that's my answer.
I think this is something that is really a vast topic, and we need to really go into a big discussion on this, whether this is how is it done, how is it used, is it used as fear mongering, or as you said to stop extremism. Yeah. Next we move on to the next question. Okay, so in Malaysia, are the adherents to the pillars of Islam monitored by a body? Is there somebody that ensures that the different mosques all over the country follows a certain code? Something I know we have something like that in India that kind of writes the policies for us and we follow through. Is that something that happens here in Malaysia, and how do you all keep tab on these things? Even you were saying about extremism as well. So how do you keep tab?
Okay, in Malaysia, historically we have 9 sultan in 9 states. So of course it has something to do with that as well, where Islamic affairs relatively or dominantly dominated by state because of the sultan, because of the structure. It was a long story why we have this kind of structure. So when we talk about this kind of body that monitor the way of Islam to be practiced, so basically it depends on not interpretation, but the guideline given by the state. So and that's why, for example, now we are having the COVID-19 issue, and that's why in certain state we are allowed to have congregational prayer. In some state we are not allowed to have congregational prayers. In some state we can have Jumat prayer with more than certain amounts of people, but in certain state we can't because of this kind of structure that we are having. It was a long story, so yeah, it depends on the guideline given by each state because it is guided or it is ruled by the religious affairs where the head of the religion of the state is sultan. So it depends on the guideline or the I think I mean from each state how they monitor the practice of Islam in our country.
Okay, so every state is the policies are given by the state itself, which is the Sultan. For example, I saw a picture today of Sembahyang Jumat being carried out in a mosque. I think it was in KL or Selangor, of course with social distancing. But in some states, you are saying it was not allowed yet. That is a state decided issue. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much. So basically, there is no one big body. It is decided by each state differently. Maybe you can give us an example of any state in Malaysia that has a vastly different way of practicing Islam or has different rules compared to another state. Maybe. I think
Okay. It sounds controversial, but yeah. Maybe the explicit example between state of Perlis, for example, and another state, because Perlis they have something not belief but some different interpretation of the way Islam to be practiced. That's why in Perlis, for example, in certain prayer they don't conduct any any ceremonies, for example, ceremonies during the prayers like zikir, because they have different interpretation of practicing Islam. Compared to other state, for example, after Salat, we have this kind of ceremony like zikir or kenduri. Yeah, so that's the difference because they have their own interpretation as well in the sense of practicing the religion itself.
Hey, what zikir is like a kanduri or is what is it called? It's like there's a
it's like chanting lah, chanting.
Okay.
It's like chanting lah.
They
Basically,
don't do that in
Perlis, they are not allowed lah to have this chanting lah.
Okay. So wow. So if you were to go to Perlis, then you are not allowed to do it lah.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, basically.
Very good. This is new information for me. I never knew this. Okay, next question. Thank you so much, Faisal. So much of new knowledge today. What legitimacy do Islamic organizations have in Malaysia? This is something that you can address directly as the president of ABIM, I think. What legitimacy do Islamic organizations have in Malaysia?
Yeah, I think maybe one of the biggest the legitimacy that Islamic organizations have, the culture of wearing scarf especially among women in Malaysia. If you look at the history of Malaysia in 1960s, basically we as a Malays sometimes, especially because of maybe perhaps in the aftermath of colonization, it is far from practicing Islam as a way of life. Sometimes we, as I said, we perceive Islam then just as a rituals. Yeah, because of hundreds of years being colonized. So when we talk about wearing scarf or wearing veil, so in 1960s, that's why post-independence, relatively Muslim in Malaysia, it is hard to find Malay, especially wearing a headscarf. So in 1970s, the emergence of ABIM, the establishment of ABIM, we tried to fill this kind of identity of Islam to be embraced by the Malay. So Malay need to embrace Islam as a way of life. It's not just about Islam as a ritual religion, but it's more than that. As what was discussed, even in 1970s, we debate the book of Islam and secularism, we try to find ways how to give more exposure about Islam to find a solution to the issues, the problem that society now having. Just, instead of putting Islam confined with the activities in the mosque. And you can read as well many books, even by the person who asked the question. You can read a book by Esposito, for example. He wrote many books about Islam in Malaysia, about ABIM, about Islamic organization, about the legitimacy of Islam, how Islam spread awareness. How ABIM or Islamic organization in 1970s, since 1970s, spread the awareness among Malaysian, among the Malay, about Islam as a way of life. Sorry, the author is John L. Esposito. John L. Esposito.
How do you spell that? John L. and then the Esposito?
Okay, Esposito.
Okay.
Yes, good. So that's one of the biggest lah. So now it is not just about wearing veil, wearing scarf, but now it becomes trend. If we ask, as a Malay as a Malay Muslim, if you ask our parents, if you ask our parents about the situation in 1960s, people, they feel shy to wear tudung, to wear scarf, because it is very rare to have scarf, because sometimes people throw some bad words towards them lah, like conservative or whatsoever lah. So people try to avoid wearing scarf, even though they know it is compulsory in Islam. But after 1970s, when we try to spark the values, the understanding about Islam, the reason behind wearing the scarf and so on. So slowly in stages, without compulsion, now alhamdulillah, most of the people, it becomes trend. It become a good business lah for the business women lah, especially to run business on the scarf lah.
Okay, thank you. This is a good question. I think, of course, directly ABIM can answer it. For the next one, we do something interesting. Maybe we'll go to the floor. We can ask somebody from the whoever who have joined us to ask a question. Maybe people are bored hearing my voice alone. Maybe we can hear somebody else's voice. Anybody from the floor want to go and ask Faisal directly a question? Please go ahead. Okay, I see Harmeet, you have raised your hand. You want to go?
Hi Faisal, great slides previously. I had a question. So in Orientalist studies, it seems like Malaysian Muslims are often overlooked. It may be said as compared to the perception that the Orientalist view of Arabs in particular. Why do you think this is so? And what does this say about the relationship maybe between Arabic Muslims and Muslims from Nusantara?
The differences between Arabic Muslim and Muslim in Nusantara. You mean the differences?
I'm just talking about the relationship in general, and also the fact that like Orientalists, so like Europeans who are writing about the Orient, they seem to Nusantara at least seems to have take a lower position of prominence compared to like Arabia in general. Does it say something about how maybe Arab Muslims have a hegemony of the idea of Islam? How are Malay scholars perceived in universities in Egypt and Jordan, and is Malay Muslim theology taken seriously in the world of Islamic theology and academic circles and whatnot?
Okay, thank you. Very good question. Okay, first, in terms of practicing, of course, I can say it is dominated by Arabics, because we have Arabic texts. in Quran, for example, in Quran, it was written in Arabic, in High Arabic lah. And of course, in our, for example, when we pray, when we recite a certain dua, for example, okay, of course we have to recite in Arabic. So predominantly it is about the Arabic culture lah. I mean, not culture, but Arabic practice. But in terms of cultural relativism, I mean, we have our own, because Islam, we have this kind of fundamental values. We are also this kind of the flexible values lah. So the fundamental thing, as I said, the pillars of Islam, prayer, when we recite Quran, for example, it must be in Arabic. Even when we do azan, when we call for prayer, it must be in Arabic. So because it is something fundamental. But it is not just that. We have our own system that more flexible with the culture. This comes with the kind of cultural relativism. And that's why even in Islam, we have this kind of legal pluralism. When we talk about law, for example, when we talk about Islamic law, we have the fundamental laws that cannot be changed, that is fixed. But we have certain kind of laws that must be adapted with the cultural views, or I mean the cultural sphere of certain state or certain religion, or even now we have this kind of Nusantara. So it has something to do with the kind of the relationship between Islam in Arab or Islam in Malaysia. Okay, but it is very important to note as well, when we talk about Islam, now we can see it is not just predominantly dominated by scholars from the Arab state. Even now, we can see a lot of scholars from Islam. They settle down and they have their own base in US or in Europe. So we have now very different kind of perspective of Islam. It's not just Islam from the land of Arab, but Islam from the land of Southeast Asia, even from the Europe state, because there are a lot of preachers, for example, scholars who settle down in US. They bring Islam from the perspective of maybe minority Muslim in the US, from the perspective of Western values. So we are rich with this kind of perspective of Islam. It is not just dominated by Arab scholars now. We have many preachers who can speak in English, who bring more progressive or moderate ideas when we talk about Islam in this perspective of wider, even a more progressive or more moderate and more cultural in context, for example, in Southeast Asia. So that's kind of the things that for me, we are rich with that. It is not just dominated by Arab countries. Even when we talk about the interpretation of practice of Islam, we have our own school of thoughts. We have mazhab. We have mazhab that can be practiced in certain place, in certain area, by looking at the context of the certain place. That's why even one of the mazhab that always be perceived as flexible, like Hanafi, it is well practiced in European countries, like even since the time of Andalusia, Spanish time. So meaning to say, we have a lot of scholars, ideologies, even not only in from the Western perspective, we also have scholars from African, so they brought their own perspective. We have scholars from India as well, a lot of Muslim scholars from India. So we are rich with this kind of perspective. It is, I mean, how to mix together, how to find the better way to suit with the cultural context within country.
Just a quick response to that. I'm glad that you brought that up, especially because like Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim nation, and so it's fair, I think, that especially like the Muslim perspective from Nusantara gets its voice heard. But on the point of like Arabic, right, and the point of it has to do the church, the Catholic Church.
When you put a movie, I think Bridgerton, I can put Bridgerton here for you. I think Bridgerton here for you, lah. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So I think in the 1960s, the Catholic Church departed from using Latin in in its service, right? Do you think that would ever happen in Islam?
Sorry, pardon, can you repeat again?
Yeah. So in the 1960s, the Catholic Church, who until that point they were using Latin in their service, because of such a diverse communities, right, that preachers were preaching to, so they took the decision to stop preaching in Latin when necessary. So then there was preaching in English, for example, and in other like Romance languages. Would you see that happening in Islam ever?
Yeah, as I said, even in Islam, we have something to do with this kind of fundamental things, and also something to do with something flexible lah. Of course, if you talk about preaching Islam, everybody can preach Islam in many languages. Even as I said, even in US, in Western countries, even in Germany, in France, we have many Muslim preachers who preach Islam to give more exposure to Islam by using their own languages. But of course, in terms of fundamental things, like I said, azan, even in the Quran, reciting certain dua, it must be in Arabic because it is something something has to do with the fundamental issue. I mean, fundamental the thing that is fixed. But by having Islam that perceived as dominated by Arabics because of the text, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that we are Arabs. Like for me, I myself, when I am Muslim, I don't think that when I practice Islam, when I recite doa, for example, in Arabic, that makes me Arabic because I'm still Malay. Because when we talk about Islam, when we practice Islam in certain, certain the fixed values of Islam that must be conducted in Arabic, it doesn't dilute the identity of the community because Islam doesn't belong to Arab. That's what we do believe. Islam is universal type. Islam is the religion of universal. So when we talk about the universal value of Islam, it doesn't mean that Islam will dilute you as a Malay because it doesn't mean that you are Arab. Even the Arab countries or the Arab Muslim must bear in mind that it doesn't mean that you are the leading Muslim in this world. Even now, even then, we used to have Turkish, the Caliphate of Ottoman Empire, for example. So all in all, we are. We are not diluted by the name of Islam. It doesn't dilute the identity of Islam or even identity of any races who become Muslim to become Arabic, to become Arab nation. Because as I said, even during the time of Islamic Caliphate, we used to have other than Arabs who are leading the Muslim countries like Turkish Ottoman Empire. So yeah, so that's the thing lah. So there is no harm to practice Islam, to have certain conduct of code, for example, in Arabic, because for us it doesn't dilute our identity as Malay. We still remain as Malay. We can speak Malay. We still have our own identity as Malay.
Okay, Faisal, thank you so much for those two questions. One was, does the Arabic Islam has hegemony on the way the world views Islam? And you made a very good point on how from different regions of the world, Islam is preached in different ways, and they have brought the scholars of different regions have brought that ideology to the forefront. And if somebody is really researching about Muslim culture and Islam, they will actually look at the whole perspective instead of just look at Arabic culture. But you did point out a very good point where your scripture is written in Arabic, and so people tend to be a bit skewed towards looking at that first, only then moving on to the rest. But doesn't mean that y'all are less, or doesn't mean that y'all do not have any perspective or different points. That's very good. Number two was the question was about fundamentals. Yeah, will there ever be a time when you will preach or you will do your azan in a different language. And you I think you hit the nail on the head there, where you said that some things are essential, some things cannot change, and those things shouldn't affect you as a person, but it is the religions. And just because it is written in Arabic doesn't mean that you are going to be Arabic, right? Thank you very much for that. Very nice. Just to remind everybody, we are closing the session at 10. And also, I know some of you all have asked many questions, but we'll keep the questions until 10, and then we'll stop there. So Faisal, before we move on, there's been a question that I think Simarpreet will like to ask. Go ahead,
Yep.
Simarpreet.
Hi, Faisal. Simar here. So I think one of the questions that intrigue me always, because I'm very interested in languages, is the definition of the word kafir according to the Quran or the Hadiths or the Muslim way, and you know how it's come to be, what it really means, and how do we go into all that? How do we, as non-Muslims, interpret that?
Just a basic point. In Arabic, of course, kafir derived from Arabic words. Kafara. Kafara means the person who disobey. Yeah, that's the literal meaning of the kafir lah. The person who disobey. So, for example, in Islam, for example, when we ask Muslim, for example, to do certain things, and okay, for example, when we ask Muslim to do prayer, for example, okay, if he refuse first, and then if he refuse to accept that prayer is part of Islam, so according to many scholars, he is considered as kafir. So it doesn't mean that refusing to do certain conduct, but refuse the existence of the salah. I mean, they refuse the existence of the teaching. So meaning to say, in order to reach the level of kafir, it is, I mean, among the Muslim, to reach the level of kafir, it has something to do with a certain stage. It must reach certain stages, and of course, there are a lot of interpretations when we talk about kafir. And but for me, if you want to discuss the issue of kafir from the perspective of non-Muslim, I think we have to add something more, meaning to say it is not just kafir, but we have previously we have this kind of dichotomy between kafir harbi and kafir zimmi. What kind of interpretation that I will use? Kafir harbi meaning to say those time during the war. I mean, okay, for example, in Arab states, when Muslim conquered certain states, so if the non-Muslim in that area refuse to pay jizya means like tax, for example, to the emperor, to the Muslim empire. So if he refused to pay, so he is regarded as kafir harbi. So kafir who refused to accept the rule of Muslim empire. But if he can accept, so he is regarded as kafir zimmi, meaning to say he can live in a peace. So I think your question more concerns on this matter, the interpretation of kafir harbi, kafir zimmi, the dichotomy or the unequal type of kafir or non-Muslim in Islamic state. But I have to shed some lights. This kind of issue or this kind of dichotomy is no longer relevant. Even now in ABIM, we always having this kind of discourses with the new way of interpretation of Islamic governance. Like, for example, when we engage with the scholars like Al-Khardawi, many renowned scholars now, they try to debunk with this kind of type of dichotomy or unequal type of the non-Muslim in the Islamic state. Because now we are no longer living in the period of war, so there is no reason to have this kind of type, kafir zimmi or kafir harbi. But now we are living in democratic society. Everyone is regarded as equal citizen. Either you are Muslim or even if you are non-Muslim, Even there is no dichotomy between the non-Muslim, because everybody must be treated as equal as citizen. So yeah, that's my point lah. So there is no dichotomy lah. I mean, when we talk about democratic society, when we talk about equal citizenship, of course, we have to embrace the equality principles, whether you are Muslim or you are non-Muslim, in every Islamic state that we are living.
Okay, thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Simar, for the question. Actually, before we move on to the next question, I think we have seen this question come up in social media a couple of times, and we are trying our best to frame it. But there is a certain fear, or this word kafir is spread sometimes to put fear in people, and a lot of people will say that, oh, a Muslim preacher will try to convert you, because in their language they say that you are kafir, so they want to change you or convert you to become a Muslim, and if you do that, you get certain pahala and all these things. These are the misconceptions, I think, that a lot of people in Malaysia have on the Islam religion. And so there is a question saying that, to put it very, very politely, he's saying, or she's saying, why do Islamic people like to convert other people? So maybe you can try to shed some light on this very sensitive but pertinent question here in Malaysia.
Okay, actually, what we do believe in ABIM, when we talk about dakwah means preaching. It is not just about converting people. It is about how to portray yourself. I mean, to walk the talk. I mean, that's why in this kind of preacher, you yourself have to behave, or you have to correct yourself in the first place. Meaning to say, you have to walk the talk. Some of the Muslim preachers, we always talk about, the gold age of Islam, the goodness of the caliphate, the just caliphate. I mean, the just ruler, for example. But at the end of the day, we ourselves, we fail to portray what you are talking about. I mean, we fail to walk the talk. So in ABIM, when we talk about preaching, I mean, preaching about Islam, we have to behave ourselves in the first place. We have to show the good examples of akhlaq or Muslim character, the good character of the Muslim in the first place, before we talk about, or before we try to convert others to become Muslim. Secondly, now we are in the period of, in a period of Islamophobia. So for this, when we talk about dakwah, preaching, it is more important to give exposure to our non-Muslim friends about Islam in the first place, rather than by forcing them to accept Islam. That's what we do believe. Instead of forcing them to become Muslim, Muslim, it is relatively more important to give more exposure to our non-Muslim friends about Islam. I mean, when we talk about the justice, when we talk about democracy, when we talk about the tolerance of Islam, we have to give more exposure. What does it mean by tolerance in Islam, rather than by forcing others to accept our religion? And more importantly as well, in ABIM, we try to engage with the non-Muslim as a partner, because, for us, our non-Muslim friend is a partner. It is not a matter you are our foe or you are our enemy because we are not Muslim. No, it is not as simple as that. Because you are partner, and from with our non-Muslim friends, it means that we try to share common effort to find a solution to our problems that we are facing. So that's what we do believe. When we talk about interfaith religion, I mean interfaith dialogue, for example, it is not just about to enforce or to force our other faith to accept Islam. It is not as well just to have some tea time, or to have a cup of cake, just ceremony. No. But in ABIM, when we talk about interreligious dialogue, it is about to give more understanding about Islam, because now we are living in this kind of Islamophobic rhetoric, for example. So it is very important when we talk about interfaith dialogue. It is about to give more exposure, more in-depth exposure about Islam to our communities, I mean to our other Muslim communities, rather than just on the surface, like I said, just to share coffee, and not towards the extreme point of view, converting others, because at the end of the day, when we talk about conversion, it is the hand of God, Allah, or it is within the hands of God. Allah will decide whether you will become Muslim or not. So when we talk about the interfaith dialogue, the third phase that we are moving now, ABIM, we try to host our interfaith friends to find a common solution to the problem that we are facing. Sorry, if I may share my last slide, I just reserve my last slide to answer this question. Okay, sorry, yes. Okay, this is example what we are doing right now. Okay, with the help of Gerakan Belia juga lah. Thanks Gerakan Belia for helping us to be endorsee for this event. We ourselves, we ABIM, we host a discussion, separately with our interfaith friends. We talk about climate change, we talk about the issue of environment that really concern us, especially the young people. So when we talk about the interfaith, we host discussion with our interfaith friends, not just to discuss about religion, but to discuss the religion from the perspective how can we share our values to find solution to the common problem that we are facing, like for example the climate change. And of course, after the discussion with our friends, the Gerakan Belia, for example, we have 36 endorsee from Catholic Church, from Satya Sai Baba, from Young Buddhist Association. So all 36 religious, mostly religious organization become endorsee to be part with ABIM to form this kind of under this like forum lah, Malaysia Interfaith Climate Change Network. So meaning to say, when we talk about interfaith, we try to give more exposure, understanding about Islam, and also we try to host some sort of discussion. We appreciate the values of all religion, and how we sit together to find solution to the common problem that we are facing. So this is one of the example that we try to have. So we reach the stage of more than just a ceremonial dialogue, or rather than to force our non-Muslim to become Islam, but to have a common values that we can share together to find a problem that we are facing. And in fact, inshallah, after this, perhaps we will host a discussion with our interfaith or interreligious friend how to find solution on the issue of corruption by looking at the values of all our multi-faith religion in Malaysia. So these are the things. So if you talk about the forcing others to become Islam, for me, it is within the hand of God. Allah will open the heart of our non-Muslim friend, to become Muslim or not. Sorry for sharing. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Faisal.
Stop sharing.
I think I would like to congratulate you on already such an amazing session, and the way you have answered so composed and very well done. We will take another 2 more questions. But before I really admire what Faisal was saying, that the topic on unity is not something that we are going to play a fool with. It's not something that you sit down and have a cup of tea and it's part of a discussion that is just to please a crowd or just to tick a box. But the unity talk and the unity discussion is going to be something that we want to take very seriously. And I love when you say shared values, because at the end of the day, that is the thing we are building on. We are building on shared values. So thank you, Faisal. Next, we'll move on to a question again from the floor. Last question from the floor. Tulsi Tivani, I think, has a question. If I could pass to you, Tulsi.
Hi. Thank you, Gurpreet. Good evening. Thanks, Faisal, for being here and taking the opportunity to share with us. as I understand, my question has to do with Islam and it being a religion known for compassion. But my doubt arises from the treatment that the Malaysian, I don't know if it's a state treatment or the Malaysian people towards Shia Muslims, and why is it not an accepted practice in Malaysia? Is there a particular reason? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is an accepted form of practice in other parts of the world, and I think the Quran also does mention it. I stand corrected, but if I'm not mistaken, it does. So why does Malaysia take a different stand, and a very hostile stand, in fact? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, just a brief on the Shia issues. Yeah, of course, it was a long history as well, the existence of the Shia. Yeah, I think after the companions, it was a war, like, you know, the different views, mainly about the political issues. Okay, on this kind of issue, for me, from what I do believe, okay, Shia is accepted to practice per se in Malaysia. Okay, like for example, taking example, the Iranian people or the foreigners, like students from Iran who study in Malaysia, so they can, they can practice. But the issue in Malaysia, they cannot propagate the understanding or the element of Shia in Malaysia because of this kind of, in Malaysia we have certain laws that came from the state ordinance, like Parliament Act lah. But in state, in Adun, they call it, sorry, not ordinance, but they call it as enactment. So we have, the state criminal, the state Islamic enactment, for example, something like that. So
Enactments of the state.
yeah, Sharia enactments. Thank you. Yeah, so in each state, they have their own Sharia enactments. Yeah, there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of differences. So it depends on how the religious authority use that kind of enactment. And of course, it depends on as well. Yeah, it sounds sensitive as well because, as I said, when we touch about this state enactment or Sharia enactment, when we talk about this kind of issue, it will touch the higher authority lah. I mean, the Sultan, the head of religion. Yeah, so of course, it is kind of sensitive issue lah. But from what I do believe, it is accepted to practice, especially for the foreigners in Malaysia. But the problem arises when they try to propagate. And if you ask me the reason why, so of course lah, there are a lot of historical background behind. And of course, I myself, I used to have this so-called like more rational debate lah with the Shia, because Shia, they have their own interpretation as well when we talk about practicing certain way of Islam and so on. Yeah, but it is in a harmonious way lah. But I cannot comment more than that lah, because it has something to do with this kind of religious affair. It involves the head of the state and so on. Yeah, but I think it is not a black and white answer, and of course we cannot answer this question overnight. Perhaps there are certain kind of discussions that need to be highlighted as well. But there are a lot of historical backgrounds behind the existence of the Shia because of political impasse, or there are a lot of things lah. Even now, even in Iraq, even in Iran, I mean, both plays their own roles lah. If we say persecution of Shia in Malaysia, some of Malaysians say that there are persecution of Sunni by Shia in Iran as well. So it is, like a rolling ball that we fail to find the solution. So it is not an overnight answer lah. So it has something to do with the long history, of the Shia.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to put you on a spot. I guess it was a good question.
No problem. Thank you for the question.
Yes. Some things maybe are out of the hand of Faisal. But thank you Tulsi for the question. I think it is a question that that we all need to look in further. Maybe look at the historical background and why is it in Malaysia we follow a certain way and overseas we follow a certain way. Okay, thank you Faisal. One last question. Simarpreet will put up on the slide. This is a very nice one. Something very positive to end the night with. Could you please share some of the plans by ABIM to bridge appreciation of all the various religions in the country so we can promote deeper religion tolerance? What are your plans? What are ABIM's plans for Bangsa Malaysia and to build this bridge between the Islamic community and all of us here in Malaysia?
Okay, first, inshallah, we plan to print out the presidential address, the Cosmopolitan Islam and the Forging of Bangsa Malaysia. When it comes out, we will, share with you lah. Share with your communities, because from that presidential address, it highlighted our plan on racial relations, on the issue of ethnicity, and also the issue of Bangsa Malaysia. Okay, more as overall, even I pointed out just now as well, we try to find amicable solution. We try to bridge the gap. Between all races or all religions in Malaysia, to reach some kind of the new level. Meaning to say, we try to bring the issue of ethnic relation from point A to point B. Point A is that like what we are having right now. Yeah, perhaps segregation. It depends on the interpretation. Some say discrimination. Some say maybe everything put under the carpet or whatsoever lah. So that's the point A. So we want to bring the ethnic relation from this kind of point A to the point B. What is point B? It is not assimilation. When we talk about Bangsa Malaysia, we do not assimilate all races, because we appreciate the diversity in terms of culture, in terms of races. You always being sick when you talk about Bangsa Malaysia, it doesn't mean that you are less Indian or you are less Chinese or you are less Malay. We are not talking about this kind of things, Bangsa Malaysia as assimilation. And we also do not talk about Bangsa Malaysia as segregation. Just talk about the surface of Bangsa Malaysia without any concrete plan to bring the society from this kind of point A to point B. What we want to do is to bring Bangsa Malaysia as a movement. That's the most important thing. Bangsa Malaysia is not just a surface to promote religious harmony, but it is kind of movement to host all partners, all religious belief, all communities, all races, to sit together as solution, to find an amicable solution to the problem that we are having now. Now the point A is, when we talk about the problem issue that we are having right now, we try to segregate the issue by stereotyping, for example, or by segregating the issue according to the races. When we talk about poverty, Malay always perceive poverty as a Malay problem ourselves. Chinese, perhaps they talk about the poverty in the eyes of the Chinese per se. Indian, from their own perspective. But what we want to do when we talk about Bangsa Malaysia, it is kind of movement to have common understanding, to have a shared values, to find amicable solution. So we want to have the new culture of Bangsa Malaysia. We are in the same page. We are on the same page to fight against poverty, to have more civilized nation, to have more nations with dignity. We join hand in hand together to perceive the problem as our problem that we have to tackle together. Like, for example, the issue of corruption, it is not just about the issue of public servant. that's not just issue of the Malay who tend to corrupt. It is not just about the Malay leader. It is not just about one community, but we have to bear in mind it is about the issue that all together, all of us have to play our role to have to set the common agenda to find solution. Like what I shared just now, the climate change, for example, it is not just about Islam. It's not just about Hindu. It is about the common effort from all religious leaders, all religious faith-based organizations to have one common platform to fight against this kind of climate change. Like poverty, as I said just now, we are the bangsa Malaysia that hate poverty. We are the bangsa Malaysia that hate disunity. We should not be divided by looking at the problems from segregated angle, but we have to bear in mind it is our common problem. So, ABIM, if you ask us, we want to bring this agenda, the agenda of Bangsa Malaysia as solution. Bangsa Malaysia as something that has to do, that can host all together, can assemble all together to share their own shared values to find amicable solutions that we are facing right now. So, yeah, perhaps that's the thing.
Terima kasih. Thank you so much, Faisal. When you said when you answered that question, I couldn't help but also share that GBSM, in partnering with ABIM, will be running this series every 2 months, and using the network that ABIM has, we'll be getting in touch with people from different races and different communities, because just like what Faisal was saying, unity is a serious topic. It's something we want to talk about, and we want to not isolate issues and make it race-based, but make it a problem that the whole nation is facing, and we can use our shared values to solve these problems together as we work hand in hand to solve one problem at a time, and to quote what you were saying just now, to become the best nation out there, one problem at a time. I think we need to work together. Yeah. For everybody that is here and everybody that attended, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. GBSM would like to declare today that we will work together with ABIM to bring about this Bangsa Malaysia that is a shared, not only value, but shared goal of the whole Malaysian people and the Malaysian nation. Yeah. Before we end, we would like to take a picture. And if everybody on the Zoom call can, on your cameras, if you all don't mind, we will take a picture so we can see the diverse group that has joined us today. Actually, Faisal, I have to say thank you again from GBSM. It was a great session. I've been receiving so many comments that you were wonderful. You took all questions very well. It was very well done. I think today I will go home with my Cawan Separuh Penuh with the knowledge that we gained from this session. Yeah. So okay, Simmer will be helping us take the picture. If everybody can on their cameras, what we'll do is okay. On the count of 2, I want you guys to put a reaction, which is the heart reaction. You can see the reaction button is at the bottom. On the count of 2, we'll put a reaction button, and then Simmer will take the photo. Okay. But before we start, Simmer, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So when I say 1, 2, then we press the button. Okay, and then Simmer will take the photo. 1, 2, 3. Okay, everybody, make sure your hearts are up. Smile. Simmer, got it?
Yep, got it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Selamat malam to everybody. Have a good night. Thank you so much, Faisal. Together. So thank you so much for attending. From my heart to yours, thank you very, very much.
More collaboration after this. Thank you for asking the question as well. For the question is.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. With that, we'll wrap up today's session. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. If you guys want to find out or want to get in touch with ABIM, let us know. We'll put you in touch with them. Please visit their Facebook page, their Instagram page. Very active. They even have a TV station that there has a lot of media going up all the time on YouTube. So please check that out. And also, since you're already on the GBSM Facebook, please like and follow the GBSM social media. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye.